You are listening to Salty Believer Unscripted, a conversation on Christian ministry and the Christian life.
This episode is a continuation of a previous conversation with Mark Bradley. You can find part 1 of our interview on SaltyBeliever.com.
What are the concerns we should be looking for? What should we be hoping for? Just as far as, and I'm thinking more like in terms of not just for seminaries, but for the churches. Are we going to see a huge shortage of trained pastors? Are we not? Is the training still just as robust? Are these guys more serious, less serious? That's kind of what I'm looking to from my perspective. Like after they leave you, what can we be looking to in the next few years? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I know that broadly speaking, the trend is that we've multiplied the kinds of degrees students can earn. And so the percentage of students who are taking the classic full, gold standard MDiv is down from what it used to be, because MDiv used to be the main degree. So there weren't even that many options. And so there is a concern that I've heard President Orge even express about, we need more people to, all these other degrees are fine. We need people to be counselors and all those other things. But doggone, we need people to be pastors. Let's call that out. And, I see that trend in the Northwest as well. People being called to other things too. But we've got lead pastors who are, studying with us right now, and lead pastors who are interested to join us. And we continue to see hope in that area. So
it's still looking good. You're thinking it's still looking good.
Yeah, I think we've still got, especially with the business model we have, where we've got strong support from our state convention. If we had to just be solvent on our own, our campus would probably not exist. But because of, so another way to be positive about it is, Jeff Forge came up to meet with the executive director of our state convention several years ago to say, so what do you see as a trend here? Are you guys going to keep dropping your support until it's nothing? Because I'm not sure if that model will even work. And his answer was, and Jeff's first question was, what do you see as the role of the seminary in the Northwest? Do you see a valid role for it? Do you value it? And yeah, they're still valuing it to the tune of $100,000 a year. So
that says they're still believing. I mean, that says, hey, we're still believing in not just the program you're doing, but this is still a viable way to bring pastors up. I mean, this is
exactly
the headwaters of trained pastors coming out of seminaries, into these streams. They still see that as a valuable place, a valuable source.
Exactly.
Which is good. I mean, it's really okay. So let me shift gears a little bit. How are these students different? Like, you talked about some generational things, but what are some specifics? I mean, obviously you're just broad brushing here, but just sort of the general trends. What's different about the young students coming up today compared to the students who are currently pastors retiring now, right? Like that's sort of the gap. They probably came up through 80s and 90s. 70s, maybe, as far as their seminary education, and now they're retiring. What do you think is sort of different besides the obvious, like the tech gadgets? And I mean, besides that, like,
right. Well, I think one of the main differences would be what we already touched on, of a higher percentage of our students are not lead pastors and don't intend to be lead pastors now than used to be the case. But among those who do feel called to pastoral ministry,
real quick, hit pause. They don't. So you have people that are getting that kind of education, but they have no intentions of being lead pastors. Is that what? That's what I just heard you say.
Yes, collegiate ministers, youth pastors.
Do you think any of that's just out of some fear? You think any of that's just out of nervousness or fear? Those individuals will probably honestly become some maybe many of the people who do go, now that I've done this for a bit, I'm feeling. Do you think it's like a half step that maybe wasn't as available in the past? Could that be part of it?
It could be, but my son is a youth pastor and has been for about almost 20 years now, and he's sensitive to the narrative of, when are you going to become a real pastor?
Okay.
He's called
thinking
to
this is it. This is what I'm
He's
doing.
called to be a youth pastor, and
Okay.
he intends to retire as a youth pastor, even though he's really developed as a
Do
preacher.
you feel like that was normal in when your generation, the students you went to school with, the people when you were pastoring, you said you pastored, did you feel like that was normal in your generation coming up?
Well,
That's like your son, like really holding ground on those things, or do you feel like it was
yeah.
more the trajectory toward that lead pastor?
Well, I think the older attitude was that, the destination is to become the lead pastor. And so I actually have a positive take on the fact that people are getting trained to do other things as well. Because I think it's a healthy recognition that, well, there's other jobs in ministry than just being the lead pastor who preaches all the time. I mean,
And
that's
didn't need training.
yes, and they need training. And so praise the Lord, they want to get the training to be, to teach really good youth lessons and
Yeah.
to lead their
Yeah.
collegiate ministry, skillfully and to teach well there and to be an effective chaplain and everything else. So, like among our graduates last May, we had a couple of lead pastors, church planting pastors specifically. We had a couple of chaplains, one an Army chaplain, another one going into hospital chaplaincy. We had a guy who was a deacon in his church, but he's preparing to go international mission board as an international missionary.
Pretty broad spread, you're telling me. I mean, that's what I'm hearing.
Nice broad spread. And we had a female graduate who's a layperson in her church, but she's ethnic and she has a conviction that that the particular language of her tribe she came from needs a more reliable conservative Bible translation. So she went right from the MTS. She enrolled in the MDiv. I told her, you got to get some Greek and Hebrew under your belt to really do the translation work effectively. And she said, okay, I'll do it. So she's going for it because she wants to get that language going.
Mark, here's what I'm hearing, and maybe correct my statement, maybe, or correct my thinking here.
Yeah.
When I hear somebody, now I hear it from different lanes, okay? I'll hear the lane of the people looking for more church planters. Okay, they're trying to recruit church planters, and they say,
right.
Well, it seems like the pipeline is empty or it's got less. And then I hear from people who are trying to hire, to fill these retiring pastors' roles and lead pastors. Mm-hmm. It seems like there's less. The pipeline is empty. And then I hear from the mission organizations with sending missionaries. It seems like the pipeline is empty. But maybe what I'm actually hearing is each of them have kind of had seasons of fervor, whereas maybe now we're in a season where this is a little more spread out and everybody's feeling less flow in their particular area, but maybe for the kingdom, maybe that flow is just evened out. We're in a season where it's maybe more even instead of really popular for church planting or really popular for foreign missions or really popular for the church growth. Like I think in my lifetime, I've seen those different things ebb and flow in popularity. What you're telling me is maybe we've actually got the students there. We've got the flow. We just don't have high pressure in only one area. It's more evened out. So if we're going to increase the pressure in any one area, we need to increase the total flow into the whole pipe, right? Like that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, shorthand back in the day was to talk about are you called to preach?
Yeah.
And so the assumption was if you're called to preach, you're called to be the lead pastor who does the preaching. And nowadays, that's just not the way we talk anymore. I mean, do you have a call to ministry leadership? Well, what area of ministry leadership are you interested in? Well, I want to be a youth minister. I want to be a chaplain. I want to do collegiate ministry.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it like that.
Yeah, there's more options now, which I think is in keeping with what God's really doing. It's in keeping with reality, but it does probably narrow the funnel or whatever. It narrows the focus a little bit or broadens the focus instead of channeling everybody into being a pastor. But I don't know. We might be, the positive side of it, we might be sparing some people having a senior pastor who's not supposed to be a senior pastor.
That's right.
Back in the day, that was the only option, Well, no, you should be a chaplain in a hospital, or you should be doing something different.
Or like when one of those areas is really popular. So when I was sort of coming up through that was sort of the, 2009, 10, the church planting thing was just gaining a ton of momentum. And then it felt like if you weren't saying you were going to be a church planter, you're just a nobody,
Right.
You're not even, are you even thinking about ministry? So I felt
Right.
that pressure, and there wasn't really, I think this might be a really good thing. We're winding down on time, and I want to
Yeah.
make sure we get since you're in recruitment mode, we'll make sure to get all that info so people can find you. But before that, this is a quick shot. This is elevator type stuff.
Sure.
Piece of advice for the person coming in or considering theological education, coming into, maybe they're in, Washington, Oregon, looking at your site. What's your quick shot piece of advice to that person thinking about seminary?
Well, if they need to be very serious about their faith and kingdom focus, want to grow the kingdom, and they need to be committed to the Word of God. Uh, we've got a lot of curriculum. We're going to have you read a lot of books, but if you don't love God's Word, what are you thinking? What are you doing? I mean,
you're not going to love all your classes.
You're not going to love all your classes, that's for sure, and you're not going to do well out in ministry because you gotta open the Word and be able to explain it and in a compelling, insightful way. And so I've had an assignment in the past where I gave a long quiz to students about Bible content stuff. And it was designed to do what it in fact did do. It showed that some students were really on the ball and knew their Bibles, and others woefully hadn't even read the whole Bible yet, but they're already in seminary. And it served effectively to be the wake-up call for some of them. It was like, wow, I gotta step up my game in just the devotion of Bible reading and mastering the content of this revelation God's given us,
Yeah. How about advice for the guy or lady heading out of seminary? I have one more category after this, but the people that are now graduate. So Josiah's at graduation right now, or he's headed there at the time of the recording. He's going to hear this. It'll be a month later, and he's going to go, "What?" But at the time of the recording, that's where he's at. And so, what advice to graduates as they're headed out? What advice would you give them?
Well, to just keep in touch with the baseline of your divine call. If God has called you, He will keep equipping you, and He will sustain you through the inevitable challenges. But we sometimes oversell that as if we've got it harder than anybody in the world. Look, a managing engineer has got troubles, and a physician certainly got troubles.
I'm convinced the ditch digger has troubles. I don't know how you sleep with a painful back like that. And I don't know.
Exactly.
Everybody's got their troubles, just whatever they may be.
That's right. And so, just sustain your commitment to your calling. You didn't mistake that calling originally, so don't give up when things get tough. Come on, just keep going and get some more mentors if you need them, and talk through things, but stay in the game and keep going.
Okay, now the man or woman honeymoon is over. They've been in the trenches for a season. Maybe they're a decade in past. Maybe they didn't go to seminary originally. Maybe they did, but what's your advice to that person? I mean, they're going to be in all manner of place. What kind of, is it same advice?
Sure.
Or does anything change?
Yeah, no, it's similar advice. I mean, again, if you're in the trenches and it's getting tough, well, are you called to this or not? And Paul David Tripp's book, the Dangerous Calling. Talks about the risk of losing your awe because you get too familiar with stuff. I think that's a good book to reference because, maybe you become too familiar with, well, I kind of got my genre down and I mail it in every week and it's lost the magic, and so what? It's not making a difference, and people are nagging me about stuff, and I don't know, this is for the birds. Who needs it? Well, refresh yourself. When I was pastoring in Pullman, Washington, I was there 17 and a half years. It was a university town. So there was a fresh crop of 18-year-olds every year, and I'm getting older. So I began to doubt myself, like, am I out of touch? Am I too old for this church now and everything? And so one of my recurring prayers was, Lord, I think this church might need a new pastor. And first, let's start with, can you renew me adequately, God? Make me new in ways that will keep me going here. And that helped to sustain me through a respectable tenure there. And we saw a lot of growth.
Okay, so now we're out of time. So now here's your recruitment pitch. This is the commercial time, I guess, which you didn't come on knowing there'd be a commercial. I didn't even tell you what we were going to be talking about that much, but I'm going to throw it out there for you. So, just a quick little recruitment bit, how to get started, how to get in touch with you for the person thinking about ministry for the first time, but also don't overlook. And I know, I listen to other podcasts, and this always happens when we talk about seminary. We always overlook the guy who I had an MDiv, right? I mean, I would, and then I started thinking about a PhD or further school because I wanted to sharpen the saw. And I actually sat down with Dr. Orch and said, what's the difference between a D-Min and a PhD? Like, nobody ever talks about those things. So make the pitch for the person thinking I need theological education. I'm going into ministry, but don't neglect, come on back, right? Like, how do people go about that?
Great. Well, we have a variety of master's degrees for different purposes that people might have. Our shortest master's degree is only 36 hours now, so it's comparable to just like a 1-year accounting degree someone might get.
MTE, right?
MTE, Master of Theological Essentials. And these degrees are stackable now. So you could actually, nowadays, people could graduate with and hold more than one master's degree.
I've seen a few people do that, and I walked in and went, man, why didn't I think of that? Because it's like, I didn't know if I was going to keep going, so that got me here. If I had to hit pause, I could. I'm like, man, you're smart. That's smart. Well, he's got all these papers on the wall. He looks like a genius.
Exactly. Well, it's actually an innovation, though, in the accrediting that they've only allowed that just in the last 5 years or so. So you were probably a little too early going through your MDiv for that to work for you. But anyway, we have a variety of master's degrees for people that have an accredited bachelor's degree. But we also have diploma programs that parallel each of those master's degrees. So if you don't have a bachelor's degree, but you're over 25 years old, just come on and hit seminary. And if you get at least a 3.2 GPA in your first 15 credits, you can appeal for master's by exception, and pretty much by the stroke of a pen, you become a master's student. So without a bachelor's degree, you could graduate with a master's.
I think our listeners have heard about this because this is literally what Josiah did. He came up all through the grocery store industry, all through that direction. So he's a little older coming into full-time ministry. He's been bivocational most of his life. And I encouraged him to get more theological education. He was going, I'm not going back to get a bachelor's degree. I don't have that kind of time. And then this program, I mean, it's the perfect program for him. I mean, so anyway. That's
great. Yeah. Okay, and I know you've got a lot of smart listeners, and you've featured books a lot on here. So I would guess you probably have a lot of people who are good self-studier people. They're just
we promote that a lot here.
They're reading important books and they're doing that, and that's great. There's a whole lot you can learn from that, and I never want to minimize what God's calling and the Holy Spirit and the gifts that He gives can do a lot. So seminary, I'm not saying if you don't have seminary, you're not going to succeid. No, people do succeed without seminary.
Let me make the pitch for you. I know it's this awkward place because you're the seminary guy.
Yeah, go.
I'll make this pitch for you. I have a buddy, and smartest guy. I mean, he really helped disciple me. Really smart guy. And he took just a complete self-learning. Now, I think everybody should be self-learning, but he didn't add some other stuff. And I, who also like to self-learn, and I'm doing much of that now, still went and found, that I needed to go to seminary, did all that. We meet later, and down the road, he started going to seminary eventually. And now he is a brilliant guy, but he was never challenged to read books outside circles that he had not experienced. He was never really challenged to confront completely opposing views. And so I would argue that seminary does two things. It holds you to a timeline, and anybody who doesn't understand the value of that has not done preaching week in and week out. We're like, okay, I got to figure out how to do my deal with time. But also it presses you into things you hadn't thought about. It challenges you, even if you're really well read, it pushes you to some other publishers, it pushes you to other positions, and it trains you to think like that. So I think if you're not learning how to learn and think critically on the front end, all that life study that you're going to do may or may not impact your learning. And people always point to Martin Lloyd-Jones. Oh, he didn't go to seminary, but he learned how to think and learn critically as a doctor. Like he learned those tools, right? So you got, there's some real value in that. And then I would encourage every seminary student or any kind of student to keep learning, like then apply all that stuff. But man, get those
absolutely skills. Yeah, we want people to be life learners. But the person who's completely doing self-learning, you can go a long way with that. But I'd just like to point out that, but you're not having an exam administered to you to test your mastery of that material. And you don't probably just volunteer to write a 15-page paper that uses multiple scholarly sources. And who do you have to read that to tell you whether it's solid or not?
Right.
So that some of the formal disciplines of academia really do take it to a little bit different level that will sharpen you even more. We want to be as good at communicators as we can for the gospel. And so I like to really pay attention to people's mastery of the English language and how they write, and pick that apart a little bit, and it'll make your church bulletin better and your slides for your sermon and the content of your sermon better if you
Even
get trained up that
speaking
way.
the way you're talking.
Exactly. Yes.
Even the way you're preaching. Okay, we're
Mhm.
totally out of time. We went way over, but thank you for everybody hanging with us. How do they get in touch with you if they're like, if someone's going, hey, I'm really interested in talking to Mark, I guess in that case, Dr. Bradley, like I want to think about going to seminary, where and how, what's your contact info? How do we do that?
Yeah, so they could contact me at my email, which is just markbradley@gs.edu, GS for Gateway Seminary. And they could also go to www.gs.edu for the website. And if you contact me directly, but you live outside the Pacific Northwest, I can help connect you to our
Some
online
online
program
stuff.
or
Right.
the Rocky Mountain campus, Arizona campus,
Right.
one of the California campuses. So we all help each other out. So you can start with me, and I'll route you to the right person.
Well, that all sounds fantastic. Hey, thank you for joining me in the conversation. I feel like I have more hope. It's not just all doom and gloom.
Good.
And it's been good to sort of think about where maybe we're headed as a whole for the future. So thanks, Mark. This has been really
Amen.
good.
I enjoyed it. Thanks, Brian.
Hope we can do it again sometime.
All right.
Thanks for listening. Salty Believer Unscripted is a production of SaltyBeliever.com. Visit the website to find more resources like the podcast you've just listened to.